All right, folks, welcome back as we continue our coverage of the homegoing service today of the late Congressman John Lewis of Georgia. He released an op-ed piece to the New York Times that he wanted to run today. And they have the written form, but they also have an audio form. And so we just want to take a listen to that right now.
You can redeem the soul of our nation. Written by John Lewis. Read by Prentice Oniyemi. While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. Millions of people motivated simply by human compassion laid down the burdens of division. Around the country and the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity. That is why I had to visit Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, though I was admitted to the hospital the following day. I just had to see and feel it for myself that, after many years of silent witness, the truth is still marching on. Emmett Till was my George Floyd. He was my Rayshard Brooks, Sandra Bland, and Breonna Taylor. He was 14 when he was killed, and I was only 15 years old at the time. I will never ever forget the moment when it became so clear that he could easily have been me. In those days, fear constrained us like an imaginary prison, and troubling thoughts of potential brutality committed for no understandable reason were the bars. Though I was surrounded by two loving parents, plenty of brothers, sisters, and cousins, their love could not protect me from the unholy oppression waiting just outside that family circle. Unchecked, unrestrained violence and government-sanctioned terror had the power to turn a simple stroll to the store for some Skittles or an innocent morning jog down a lonesome country road into a nightmare. If we are to survive as one unified nation, we must discover what so readily takes root in our hearts that could rob Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina of her brightest and best, mow down unwitting pedestrians on a Las Vegas boulevard, and choke to death the hopes and dreams of a gifted violinist like Elijah McClain. Like so many young people today, I was searching for a way out, or some might say a way in. And then I heard the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. on an old radio. He was talking about the philosophy and discipline of nonviolence. He said we are all complicit when we tolerate injustice. He said it is not enough to say it will get better by and by. He said each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state. It is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we called the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. You must also study and learn the lessons of history because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. People on every continent have stood in your shoes, though decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change. And that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. Continue to build union between movements stretching across the globe, because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I've done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence, is the more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide.
Greg Carr, this was John Lewis being in complete control of his own narrative.
Yeah, it was. In fact, I was trying to think of anybody else I could think of who gave a posthumous final statement to the world, and the only person that could come to mind was the person who made transition the morning in Africa, in Ghana, that John Lewis, 23 years old, delivered the speech that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee had written, that is erroneously called, as Jim Lawson would say, people get it wrong, the John Lewis speech at the March on Washington. And that was Du Bois. Du Bois did something similar. Kwame Nkrumah, in fact, read his last message to the world. And they wanted to control their narratives. And, the line in there I thought that was most powerful, and of course, I had a print edition of the Times. I'm a Times reader, but I like the print paper. So he says, answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you believe. John Lewis believed in an America that hasn't existed yet. It was an aspirational vision. And he was fueled, as Jim Lawson said, by women and men who, he named Martin Luther King, but as Jim Lawson said, when you got a guy like Kelly Miller who sees John Lewis come into his classroom at the American Baptist College with that passion, with that desire, and says, son, I got an idea for you. I'm going to steer you over here to this meeting along with these other young people, and they're going to take you to put that knowledge to action. When you see Kelly Miller, you're seeing somebody who was born in Mound Bayou, Mississippi. Mound Bayou, Mississippi, an all-black town, was where T.R.M. Howard set up shop. That's who protected Emmett Till's mother when they had the trial in Mississippi. So you see a guy like Kelly Miller, who's coming out of Black self-determination, who takes this young brother and puts him in front of a bunch of young people that are going to help him make those words action. And here we come to the end of his life. And his last statement in the world is, if you believe in something, you stand by the courage of your convictions. And let's take that separate out of the idea of America, because that's bigger than the idea of America, as Jim Lawson reminded us today. If America is lucky, it will listen to that energy, which is a Black community energy, and they will ignore that energy at their own expense. So, yeah, that's what I take from John Lewis's final earthly message.
Reese, what he says in this second paragraph, that is why I had to visit Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, though I was admitted to the hospital the following day. I just had to see and feel it for myself that after many years of silent witness, the truth is still marching on.
It's so powerful, but so tragic how we're still fighting the same battles from, when John Lewis was a 15-year-old boy and saw what happened to Emmett Till. I mean, just weeks ago, Rand Paul but he stopped the anti-lynching legislation from passing in the Senate. So it's still not a federal crime to lynch a person in this country. And so I think it's a beautiful tribute, and I think it adds an additional air of legitimacy. Some might quibble with me saying that to the Black Lives Matter movement, and people really starting to understand that all of these movements are a continuum rather than these separate factions of us continuing to still have to fight the same battles over and over again. And so I think that was a very powerful point. The part that stood out to me most was how he said ordinary people with extraordinary vision, can redeem the soul of America. I agree with Dr. Carr. We've never realized that promise of what America is supposed to be about. But I do think that we can continue to be the change that we wish to see. We can continue to be the voice that we wish to hear, and we can continue to just put in the work and really believe that we can change things just as an individual and in working with others.
Erica, to the point that Reese was just speaking to, that next paragraph, he writes, Emmett Till was my George Floyd. He was my Rayshard Brooks, Sandra Bland, and Breonna Taylor. He was 14 when he was killed, and I was only 15 years old at the time. I will never, ever forget the moment when it became so clear that he could easily have been me. In those days, fear constrained us like an imaginary prison, and troubling thoughts of potential brutality committed for no understandable reason were the bars. That is so important because, again, to Reese's point, which we always talk about on this show, it's the continuum. It's the fact that there are certain moments in American history that become transformative. And when you talk about Emmett Till, that generation, Rosa Parks had Emmett Till on her mind when she sat down on that bus in Montgomery. Muhammad Ali never forgot that image of Emmett Till on the cover of Jet magazine and the Chicago Defender. And so that generation, that was it. The death of George Floyd, the interview mix in, yes, as all these different names here, Ahmaud Arbery, we can go all the way back to Eric Garner and others. What this says is, for this generation, this is your Emmett Till. Now the challenge, Erica, is will this generation put in the 14, 15, 20 years of work to transform the country?
That is an excellent question. And with regard to what Dr. Carr said and what Reese said, I completely agree, because one of the strongest takeaway points for me in this piece was that the late Congressman Lewis said that democracy is not a state, it is an act. And Reese brought forward the decline in voter registration, brought forward incredible numbers as it relates to the GDP, as has been reported on Business News all day long, in many other elements, to say that because I believe that in generations that we kind of see now, when Congressman Lewis talked about that, though he came from a loving family, loving parents, loving home, that their love could not protect him from, in essence, the wiles of the enemy, saying it in believers' terms out of the book, out of the Bible. That being very true, he still took it upon himself to say that he was going to be in the fight, be actively in the fight for injustice, which is not something that you jump in and out of. So the question to perhaps a generation and generations where process, meaning that everything does not happen in the same way that we see it now on social media. It is not instantaneous. When you see platforms like yours, when you see the presence of luminaries like Dr. Carr, that knowledge was not gained in a moment. You're talking about years and years and years. So as we kind of move forward through these conversations, the question also has to be, is there a level of preparation, and is there a real understanding of process and time that those, all of us, but particularly those that are youth, are ready to pick up the mantle? Will they be able to wrestle and move through the process that we know is time, not to pick it up and drop it because things don't happen instantaneously, understanding that there is a real work that has to happen in order to see about the change that we're all talking about? Because again, lifting back what Congressman Lewis said, democracy is not a state. It is an act. It is a verb. It is something that requires sweat. It is something that requires perhaps loneliness and being misunderstood, but nonetheless persisting and being consistent.
Final words on this before we go to a break and talk about some other news items. And that is this here. We can reflect on Congressman John Lewis. We can talk about his legacy. We can talk about what he meant. We can talk about, again, all the wonderful things that he did. The question now, which is really what his final challenge is, the question really is, what are you prepared to do? The question is, are we as a black community, are we as a society, are we willing to right now begin to move this thing forward, begin to reimagine America. I was reading Dorothy Cotton's book, and in the intro, Vincent Harding was actually writing. And what he was talking about in the intro, he was talking about really what they were dealing with. That is, for the first time, they were talking about this idea of for the first time, a multiracial, multi-denominational view of America as a democracy. So when you heard President Barack Obama say, when you heard him say they were the founding fathers, the reality is Lewis, Vivian, Lowry, Young, King, Hosea Williams, James Orange, Fred Shuttlesworth, Constance Baker Motley, Septima Clark, Fannie Lou Hamer, Dorothy Cotton, Diane Nash, and I can go on and on and on. They were indeed the founding fathers, because what they did is actually take the very document that the founding fathers wrote, which was frankly, a hypothetical. It wasn't real, and they actually made it real. As King said on April 3rd, 1968, be true to what you put on paper. Yes. And so now the moment for folks who are still here is, what you gonna do? Mm-hmm. Are you first going to register? Are you second going to vote? Are you going to encourage others to do it? And then after the election, then what are you going to do? How are you going to push? How are you going to move a Joe Biden to act? What if Trump wins again? Then what are you going to do? Will you simply be despondent and upset and just sort of just fall back? Or are you going to say, no, there's going to be a renewed sense of urgency? Because I got to remind y'all, read your history. Southern Dixiecrats joined with Republicans to block legislation. They fought and bickered. Civil rights, voting rights after 65 was signed. It was a 3-year battle to get them to move on the Fair Housing Act, which was only signed into law and passed because Dr. King was assassinated. The question for this generation is whether or not we will have the same courage as a previous generation. But even if you have courage, will we be focused to be able to move public policy? Protest is one thing. Marching is one thing. Wearing shirts that say Black Lives Matter is one thing. But being able to change the laws on the city and the county and the state and the federal level is another. Reverend Dr. James Lawson laid out all of those laws that were passed. Will we put the work in and be those ordinary people who would do extraordinary things? All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. Black-owned businesses right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered, and the folks at Ceek.com, a company founded by inventor Mary Spio. They have a couple of products that you can also get. They have their VR, their virtual reality headsets, which allows for you to place your phone inside of this device and look at the content on Ceek.com in virtual reality. It's as if you're sitting in the room. You can also get these headsets, 360-degree 4D headphones, which gamers love. It allows for you this Bluetooth. You can have a headset to talk as well, to take phone calls. Amazing, amazing sound. Go to Ceek.com, CEEK.com, and you can simply use the promo code RMVIP2020, RMVIP2020, to get both of these products.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom, Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.